Welcome. I'm Erin Pearson. I'm the host of Decisions Now, which is a podcast brought to you by eValueServe about how to leverage data and AI to improve business decisions. Today, we're joined by Jeff Jin, who is a veteran business executive with over 2 decades of experience in shared services, outsourcing, and digital transformation across leading consulting firms, investment banks, insurance companies, and startups. Jeff brings in a lot of unique insights into how organizations can optimize their service delivery models while also navigating complex change that is occurring today. So, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hi, Erin. Thank you for that introduction, and I'm excited to be on.
Yeah, we have a really fun episode today. As everybody knows, the business landscape is evolving quite substantially, with organizations seeking both efficiency and strategic value from their operations. And your experience in shared services and digital transformation gives a really nice perspective on how companies can strike this balance. So let's explore how centralized service models are evolving and what approaches are proving the most effective in today's enterprises. Just to jump right in. A lot of companies started using centralized service models to save money, but the reason for having them seem to be changing. So beyond just cutting cost, what's driving companies to adopt and expand these centralized business service centers today?
Well, let me start by saying that there's nothing wrong with pursuing cost savings, right? Powerful statement to make when you can say to a potential executive sponsor that we can reduce costs for you by 30% while achieving these other benefits. On the other hand, I think companies today understand that the benefits of shared service is multidimensional, and they have come to expect more. So first of all, shared service is not just about centralization, but also about standardization and optimization. So in my experience, most companies do not maintain up-to-date process documentation prior to shared service adoption, which contributes to a lot of variation in how processes are performed by local teams. And when properly implemented, shared service force that standardization and rigor and foster ongoing optimization. So you're not just doing things cheaper, but also doing things better. And when I say better, it could be better service level performance, better stakeholder experience, better insights, and better business outcomes. In addition, companies are creating not just centers of scale to process low value added transactions, but also centers of excellence to conduct high value added activities, such as financial research, digital marketing, data analytics, and so forth. I'll add more color on some of these points as we go along.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And what we've seen in some research is that according to Deloitte, about 80% of Fortune 500 companies are using a centralized service center. So this is a very well-established approach that's been increasing in popularity over the past few decades. From your past experience, what separates the really successful centers from those that just perform adequately?
I think it's useful to remember that the value of a shared service center comes from centralization, standardization, optimization, and innovation. So having transactions coming from different places processed under one roof, that's really just the beginning. In my earlier career, I witnessed a shared service center where, due to historic acquisitions, there were 3 different systems for processing the same type of transactions at a center, and staff were trained on one system but not on another. So as a result, there was a lot of untapped potential in service delivery. So the level of standardization, I would say, is an important indicator of how well centers managed. Following standardization should come optimization. However, optimization doesn't just happen by itself, right? Everyone wants to optimize, but not everyone succeeds. So is there a dedicated team whose job is to drive optimization? Are they guided by a methodology? Are they looking at processes from an end-to-end perspective? And do they have a deep understanding of what the golden processes look like? So for leading suppliers, there's typically a continuous improvement team at the center whose mission is to drive ongoing optimization and innovation. And having such a team with the training and the tools is another important indicator. Related to continuous improvement, but slightly different, is innovation, which is even harder to come by because the word implies a new way of doing things. And in order to drive innovation from within, I believe an innovation architecture needs to be put in place. And by that, I mean, is there a mechanism to generate innovation ideas, to prioritize them and push them through internal processes? Is there an innovation fund to support the creation of minimum viable products? Is there an innovation culture? Are people actually incentivized to innovate, right? So these questions will give you an idea as to how innovative a center likely can be. Finally, you can understand a lot about the center by talking to its people at different levels of the organization. Do leaders seem passionate about driving change, or are they happy maintaining the status quo? Are team leads able to articulate the strategy of management, or does there seem to be disconnects? Are staff working closely with the continuous improvement teams, or do they seem preoccupied by daily processing? These will all give you important clues. So I would say average center gets the basics right. They have largely standardized processes. They have met minimum SLA targets. They've got attrition under control. They've kept year-on-year cost inflation relatively low. And they're basically seen as a dependable back office entity, whereas world-class centers have comprehensive value chain coverage, highly standardized processes. They understand risks and mitigate them. They follow a methodic approach of continuous improvement to reach stretch targets. They're able to innovate, and they operate with highly engaged teams with a common culture of customer service and proactive change.
I really like that. I think a lot of what you said, it's also about the culture of being able to create the standardization, optimization, and innovation. It's not just, do you have the process in place, but do you have the right team that's really there to enable all of this, both on the leadership level and then on the actual implementation level as well. So I really like how you broke that down there. So companies with global operations have to decide whether to centralize services worldwide or to set up regional hubs or to use a mixed approach when they're building these. So from your perspective, what should leadership teams consider when choosing the right model for their company?
I would say there are many considerations that go into this assessment. Usually, we start by looking at which geographies are in scope for the future shared service and the languages to be supported, as well as what is the nature of work for your shared service. And then you consider whether your target operating model and location portfolio offer the required skills in the scale that you're looking for. For example, if you're looking to do general back office processing in English, even with high volume, it's possible that you only need one single global hub in India. Whereas if you also need European and Asian languages in scale, you'll likely require regional hubs in those locations. A second consideration, I say, is whether you need to be close to your market. For example, if China is your number one or number two market globally, as is the case for many leading multinationals, you may want to have a hub there. Not only can a local hub deliver better stakeholder experience, it also shows your commitment to the market, which can be important for consumer sentiment and government support. A third consideration is whether you have an existing presence that could be synergistic with a future shared service. Say you inherited a shared service center as the result of an acquisition, rather than shutting it down and rebuilding it from scratch somewhere else. Perhaps you can get them onboarded in terms of your shared service methodology, but otherwise keep the existing center where it is until new requirements arise. A fourth consideration is your assessment of country risks and the recovery time objective from a BCP standpoint. There's always a balance between economies of scale and concentration risk to be figured out. So I'd say in this case, the cliche is true. Every company is different, and the shared service delivery footprint should support the operating model and the overall strategy of the company.
Yeah. I think one point that really stood out to me that you mentioned in particular is resonating with your client base as well. So really understanding, what is the market that you're trying to go after, and showing that you are investing in that market can make a huge difference in the footprint that you're able to build there and the relationships. And it's not just about being a vendor, but being a strategic vendor in that area and being a strategic partner with the clients that you're working with as well.
Absolutely. Partnership is the key.
Yeah. So what we see is traditionally companies measured success by how much money these centers are saving. But that view seems to be expanding quite a bit. So how are leading businesses measuring and explaining the broader value their shared service centers are providing to gain ongoing support of the executives?
In my experience, while companies generally justify their initial shared service investment with a financial business case, cost savings is usually not their only measures of success. And many clients I've worked with adopt a balanced scorecard approach. So the first common dimension in such a framework is indeed financial performance, which includes cost savings, but also cost avoidance and revenue enhancement. So if we're able to avoid investing in redundant tools as a result of process standardization, that's cost avoidance, right? If we're able to identify important market trends through analytics and increase sales, that's revenue enhancement, and clearly they all have value. A second dimension may be quality, which typically focuses on SLA performance, but you can also define additional KPIs, volume metrics, dependencies, etc. We usually want to acquire historic performance records to establish the baseline service levels. And if we're able to consistently exceed these targets and deliver year-on-year improvement, that's a clear way to demonstrate value. A third dimension may be risk and control, so managing process risk, physical security, information security, business continuity, etc. For example, if we can demonstrate that wrongful payment declined or procurement compliance improved, these accomplishments are worth highlighting. Customer is usually a fourth dimension. Is there an effective governance structure to align the objectives of the center with those of the entities and functions it supports? Are customers, whether internal customers or external customers, are they satisfied? And is that satisfaction reflected in the level of adoption of the model, the shared service model within the company? A strong CSAT or an NPS score is a great way to show how the center is perceived by its audience. Last but not least, people and culture are often the final dimension. So is the attrition at the center sustainable? Are employees engaged? Are they constantly learning and challenging themselves to deliver continuous improvement and innovation? I would say people metrics are typically good leading indicators of business performance. So to conclude, I would say that by adopting a balanced scorecard approach like the one I just described and defining action-oriented metrics that drive behavior is how companies can ensure that its center pursues a well-rounded set of objectives and have fact-based discussions about its performance.
Yeah. I really like how you're measuring that. I think part of this all goes to increase the lifetime value of the client as well. So if you are improving the quality, you're improving the efficiency, and you do have a strong culture of people, it will all just increase the longevity that you have. It goes into cost savings, as we mentioned, of course, for the company, but it does empower the company to just perform at a higher rate, and it will have all of these additional impacts of, a better brand in the market and better reception, and you'll get more referrals. So there's all these additional pieces that can really come along with this as well.
Absolutely. It's a comprehensive framework. Yes.
Yeah. So technology is also rapidly changing how service centers operate, with automation and data analysis tools becoming more and more common. Which technologies are delivering the best results for established service centers, and where should businesses focus on their technology investments?
I would say the more traditional components of technology adoption within shared service centers are digitization and automation. So, for example, when companies first started to assess the feasibility of shared service models, they quickly discovered that paper documents present major headaches. So scanning solutions were among the first batch of technology tools to be adopted by SSCs. And later, these scanning solutions obviously became more sophisticated with the infusion of OCR. Similarly, developing systems of engagement with embedded workflow, automating processes through robotic process automation. These are all examples of the common forms of digitalization being used by SSCs around the world. Several years ago, I worked with a global beverage company, and we developed the first RPA bots for their finance function in China, used by both their shared service center as well as the retained organization. Process mining is another example where you can use specialized software to mine event log data from systems and create visual process maps, and therefore identify areas of improvement, which is very interesting for OpEx teams around the world. And then finally, virtualization, which allows employees to access sensitive information either from a delivery center or remote locations, is an important example. It has had profound impact on both the type of work that can be performed from an SSC as well as business continuity planning. Now, a more recent and exciting development in technology enablement is intelligence solutions. And these solutions leverage AI to form mindless machine partnerships and dramatically improve efficiency and business outcomes. One of the service providers I worked at uses AI to assist call center agents. For example, the AI engine is able to assess caller sentiment in real time using voice, tone, and language analysis, and then displays the assessment back to the human agent. And this not only provides a visual cue to the agent as to whether a call is heading in the right direction, it also serves a QA purpose where the team leads can focus on quality checking calls that started out well but ended poorly. I think in general, apart from the example that I just gave above, organizations are using machine learning to spot risky transactions, generate dynamic pricing, perform predictive analysis. They're using natural language processing to monitor sentiment, about their products and services on social media. They're using large language models to power more human-like chatbots for better customer service. And these are all real-life examples that we're seeing. I wouldn't be the first one to say that AI will play an increasingly important role in business processes, of course. But I also think it is important to recognize the limitations of AI. For example, while machine learning is very good at identifying correlation between data, it is still up to a human to verify the existence or direction of causation. This is where the mind plus machine partnership comes in, where AI and humans collaborate to deliver the best outcomes, especially for mission critical processes.
Yeah. I think to your point, of course, within eValueServe, we talk a lot about mind plus machine within all of our clients. AI is really this enablement tool that we have that can drastically help, and it's improved at a remarkable scale over the past few years as well. But having the human element to really come in and analyze and in part just understand, do you have the right data in the first place that you're even feeding into it, to make sure that the analysis that AI can do on top of it is even providing the right answer to the question at hand. So there is this collaboration between really the two teams being technology and humans.
Definitely.
So finding the right balance between standard process and flexibility for different parts of the business can remain quite challenging for people. So what approaches have worked best for maintaining consistency while still meeting the varying needs of different departments?
Yeah. So two important pillars of how shared services create value have always been economies of scale and process standardization. Practice, this is obviously complicated by a number of things, including varied processes not only caused by diverse human behavior, but also by local market conditions and requirements. For example, perhaps for a particular country or industry, collection can only be effectively made by salespeople rather than accounts receivable collectors. Or perhaps there's a tax, legal, statutory reason why a process requires adaptation. And this is where the GBS or global business services model comes in to play. Several years ago, when I worked with a leading global food and beverage company, they had identified global process owners. And as they roll out standard service catalogs into a new geography, local deviations must be reviewed by these global process owners who act as gatekeepers. And upon review, the gatekeeper may decide that there is a legitimate reason for a deviation, but unless the gatekeeper signs off on the deviation, the standard service catalog and the standard process will apply by default. And even more exciting idea, apart from GBS, is what if we can further break down functional and organizational silos by reimagining processes around key stakeholder experience, regardless of functional or even organizational ownership. So for example, when an employee gets onboarded, do we make her go to HR to sign a contract, IT to collect her laptop, admin for a key card, or can we have a representative bring all of these things to her in one go? When a customer places an order, do we ask him to contact sales for placing the order, manufacturing for order status, third-party shipper for shipping status tracking, or can we offer a single online self-source interface that's available 24/7, providing transparency for the order, but shielding the customer from underlying complex processes, right? I think most of us can agree that the latter solutions lead to better human experiences. So to conclude, I believe that standardization remains a key pillar for shared service, and customization should only be introduced when there is a legitimate need. That's not to say that we shouldn't constantly be looking for ways to improve today's standard processes with stakeholder experience in mind. I also believe that SSCs, because of their relative independence from the functions it supports, is in a unique position to coordinate collaboration from otherwise siloed departments and drive these types of optimization.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you're saying is don't overcomplicate it before you need to. The common expression is if it ain't broke, don't fix it, of course. So when we apply that here, it's just like create simplicity when possible, both in terms of communication structures and trying to make it as efficient as possible for the client as well. If you don't have to introduce them to a complex communication system in order for them to get all of these pieces, or to your employee onboarding example, you have to talk to all these teams. If you can have that centralized resource, it can really improve the overall experience for each person.
I would like to clarify that I do believe in continuous improvement and innovation. So I'm not saying don't change things. I'm saying we can be optimized and standardized at the same time.
Yeah. Okay. And can you share a success story where a company significantly improved their operations through this centralized service approach? What did they do differently? What problems did they solve? And what results made the story stand out to you?
Certainly. So several years ago, I led an engagement with a leading food and beverage client who was looking to roll out their shared service model to China. They already had a GBS delivery center network in the world with, I think it was around 8 locations globally. Some were captives and a couple were operated by a third party. Greater China region for them, which includes mainland China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, was already their number 2 market globally. And they operated at 20 entities, including several joint ventures. They were already an experienced shared service operator, but China was still considered complex. There were several different lines of businesses. Most were geographically managed, but some were globally managed. There were sales entities and factories which have different needs. Processes were not standardized nor consistently documented. And the people impact was deemed high with 300 FTEs in scope. So they issued an RFP, and I was a core member of the pursuit team that ended up winning the deal, and I went on to lead the engagement. The initial scope was for finance and accounting and HR, including procure to pay, order to cash, record to report, and hire to retire. At the time, this was one of the largest, if not the largest, BPO deal in China ever. And the transition was conducted in 3 waves over a 9-month period and went pretty smoothly. As part of the solution, we committed to very significant productivity improvement from day one. To give you a flavor, the efficiency gain for F&A reaches over 50% by the end of the contract. And this is risk-free to the client in that it's an upfront contractual commitment made by us. We also committed to a set of SLAs that matches their global standard. Prior to creating the shared service in China, the client did not maintain performance records in China, so there was no baseline. And we were confident in our ability to deliver, so we agreed to adopt their service levels that were applicable to their other centers around the world, which had been in operations for years. And we met those service levels after a short grace period. We obviously implemented numerous technology and analytical tools. Some were solutions that allowed staff to deliver more effectively, such as consolidating data from different legacy systems into a single view for faster and more accurate data entry. Some gave the client greater visibility and control in managing spend and collection, such as automation bots that check for duplicates or data analytics on receivables, and other improved stakeholder experience, for example, faster generation of center letters for employees. By the time I left the engagement, we agreed with the client to add procurement operations into scope, order to cash activities shortly after. We were also discussing co-innovation with the client, including joint investment in a co-innovation fund that would drive transformation, not just within the shared service scope, but also the retained organization. I think the key reasons for this engagement to be a success was that the client's GBS organization understood shared service. They had strong sponsorship within the company. They knew that both parties must work as partners within the overall governance model. And we, on the other hand, had mature methodologies, high-performing team, good understanding of processes, knew how to deliver in the local geography, kept up investment in technology tools, and we were able to bring this holistic set of value propositions to the client.
Yeah, that's a great story. And one of the things that we see is that even well-established service centers face challenges as they are trying to improve continuously. So what are some of the major obstacles service center leaders are facing as they work to enhance performance, and what are the innovative solutions that they are finding?
Coming to that question, so for established centers, I'd say that there are several challenges facing leaders looking to enhance performance. And I want to think about this from 3 angles: people, process, and technology. So the first challenge from a people angle is resistance to change. So several years ago, when I was speaking to a senior member of a GBS organization, he told me that at their captive centers, people are often reluctant to provide improvement ideas because they're afraid such improvement will lead to impact on their own job security. So for center employees to embrace change, center leaders must create incentives for them to do so, right? And for example, build a continuous improvement culture from day one and reinforce the idea that ongoing change is not only desired, but actually expected at the center. Leaders should make improvement a criterion for performance reviews. They can highlight successful change stories and promote change agents. And I think center leaders should also be internal business developers to win more business for the center, so that team members can have room to grow. The second obstacle, I would say, is the ability to improve. So let's say you already have a highly motivated team. who's eager to optimize. But where do you actually start? Where are the improvement areas? What is considered a good service level for your process? And I have some suggestions for center leaders here. One is to create a dedicated continuous improvement team whose entire focus is driving optimization and innovation, and then adopt a quality framework such as Lean or Six Sigma, which can drive not only process rigor, but they can also provide statistical tools for process analysis. Next would be to consider process mining tools such as Celonis or SAP SignaView, which can objectively map out processes and identify bottlenecks so you don't have to rely on processor's intuition. You should also consider engaging a consultant for benchmarking so you know where you are versus top performance. They can usually share their perspective on golden processes and best practices. And then finally, I would say tackle process improvement end to end, even if that means driving transformation beyond the four walls of the shared service center. Now, obviously, driving improvement is not just a process challenge, but also a technology one. So I often hear center leaders say, I want to partner with IT to drive technology adoption within my center, but they have limited resources and are preoccupied with supporting the front office. So my suggestion here would be to make sure that the center's governance structure is operating properly, where there is sufficient visibility and sponsorship for the center's priorities. And ideally have C-suite executives, including your CIO, in the steering committee, right? Should consider maintaining some in-house capability, I would say, for those skills that are most frequently used. Not only will you have direct access to their capacity, but they can also gain valuable experience over time, focusing on your specific processes and become specialists. And then finally, engage external solution providers to bridge capacity and capability gaps. And quite often what you're looking to improve is not a completely unique challenge. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. So consultants can bring best-of-breed technologies to bear and help you create business cases also to justify the investment. My final note is if you're looking to drive not just improvement, but also innovation, the quality frameworks that I mentioned earlier, like Six Sigma, is less relevant in this case. And in this case, I actually would want to consider adopting design thinking, which is a human-centered approach to problem solving that emphasizes understanding user needs and creating solutions that meet those needs. Again, if you don't have in-house capability on design thinking today, probably best to engage a consultant to assess what it can do for you and have them guide you through that learning process.
Yeah. Jeff, one of the things I like that you keep bringing back into this is there's always all of these opportunities to optimize what everyone is doing, but you can't forget about the innovation as well, and creating this culture of innovation and just making sure that everything is balanced with each other. So you're always moving things forward as well.
Correct. And I would say this is the hallmark of shared service for the last, let's say, 10 years, is the emphasis on innovation, not just on transaction processing.
Yeah. So Jeff, just my last question for you. So, looking at how these service centers have evolved over the past years and where they're headed now, how do you see them changing in the next 3 to 5 years to stay valuable as business needs and employee expectations and technologies just continue to evolve?
Sure. Over the past decade, I indeed saw several important trends. I think shared services are increasingly multifunctional. GBS models have become more commonplace. Technology adoption has become increasingly important to driving efficiency and business outcomes. And I believe these trends will continue. I also have a few observations on future trends. So the first one is around geographic coverage. As companies continue to grow and as shared service become this common de facto piece of the overall operating model, I think it's quite natural for them to bring an increasing number of geographies into the scope to maximize impact. On the other hand, I think globalization is facing some headwinds. We already see more regulation be introduced to curtail the movement of sensitive data across borders, and these always introduce complexities to offshore delivery, right? Geopolitical tension and trade protectionism are on the rise, and I think shared service operators need to be mindful of the complex world that we live in. Second is in terms of value chain coverage. In the early days of shared services, it's not uncommon for the entire scope of a finance and accounting shared service to be just invoice processing and collection. And over time, organizations realized that they would never realize the full benefits of shared service until they look at processes end to end. And this is why we increasingly hear terms such as source to pay or lead to cash, because we want to tackle process optimization holistically and take greater control of the overall value chain. I think we'll also see a proliferation in the type of in the type of services to be brought into shared service. Historically, a common narrative for shared service value proposition is to centralize low value added activities to improve efficiency and reduce cost. And there's nothing wrong with this statement per se, right? But value addition shouldn't be a hurdle for shared service adoption. SSEs can hire smart, educated, skilled workers just like traditional teams. And a few years ago, some of my colleagues in consulting were shocked to hear that many leading investment banks conduct financial research in internal or outsourced shared service centers. But of course, companies like ValueServe have been doing this successfully for many years. And for the food and beverage client that I mentioned earlier, their GPS centers have recently expanded their offerings to include digital marketing. So employee expectation, I would say, is another interesting topic. I think it's important to recognize that while we share common values, such as respect for the individual, fair compensation, there are also differences. Some of us place greater emphasis on stability, some value interesting work, others value growth. For example, one popular characterization that younger staff demand better work-life balance, which in my view is true to an extent, but a bit simplistic. I think we rather should assess employee expectation within the context of the market environment and recognize individual differences and try to design an engagement strategy that takes these into account. Finally, on technology, I talked earlier about the rise of intelligent solutions. I think how these will reshape business is a common topic in the corporate world, not just shared service. For example, how do we realize the full potential of generative AI in business? Or perhaps have we become too obsessed with finding the nail when we have a hammer in hand? On the other hand, I think there are some considerations that specifically relate to technology in shared service. One is that I always make the point that technology enablement goes hand in hand with process standardization. The latter creates scale, removes variation, and both are important for developing technology solutions. If you've tried to develop an RPA tool for a process where there's a dozen exceptions, you know what I'm talking about. So creating a shared service is a wonderful prelude to implementing technology. And second, shared service often carries out labor-intensive activities, right? Historically, at least. But as the continued productivity gain drive those FTEs away from such activities, I think shared services will need to expand its coverage or face resistance from staff who's concerned about job security. So with these considerations in mind, I have two predictions for the shared service industry as it pertains to technology. One is that I believe shared service will increasingly be involved in data management and analytics. We know data is the lifeblood of AI, the point that you made earlier, and data management is best done in a centralized, standardized manner. At the same time, companies are increasingly interested to derive insights from data and share service environments where, if you think about it, you already have a wealth of data coming from otherwise separate teams, right? I believe it is in a unique position to perform data analysis. Second prediction is I believe business and IT shared services will increasingly be integrated. And this won't happen overnight. But I think many people have realized that technology isn't just a separate function, but should be woven into the fabric of how a business operates. And I believe that over time, we will overcome departmental silos, employee skill gaps to make such integration a reality.
Jeff, I think those are great predictions. And thank you so much for sharing all the insights with us today. I really enjoyed everything that you came with, the stories that you shared. So really appreciate you joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Decisions Now. Check out all episodes at evalueserve.com/podcast and don't forget to subscribe for future episodes.